Nobody had 50 Cent waking up bored on their bingo card. But that's exactly how this nuclear moment detonated. One minute the internet was minding its business. The next minute Curtis Jackson was lighting the match and tossing it straight into Jay-Z's legacy like it was a controlled burn that accidentally hit the mansion. Old claims resurfaced. Numbers got dragged back into daylight. And suddenly that $8 million figure was trending like it had unfinished business. This wasn't a press conference. This wasn't a legal filing. This was classic 50 Cent sarcastic, reckless, perfectly timed, and delivered with the energy of someone who knows exactly how loud the room is. And when he aimed that energy at Jay-Z, the internet froze for half a second before exploding. Because when old allegations get revived in a new era, they don't land like history, they land like a warning label. Timelines erupted. Screenshots flew. Comment sections turned into war zones. Some people laughed it off as trolling. Others leaned forward like they'd been waiting for this chapter to reopen. And once the word resurface entered the conversation, the internet did what it always does. It dug, speculated, exaggerated, and treated the moment like a leaked episode from a documentary Netflix hasn't announced yet. This didn't just make the Kardashians look boring. It made hip-hop history feel unfinished. The moment 50 Cent decided to reopen old conversations, the internet knew this wasn't going to be a polite walk down memory lane. This was a controlled demolition of nostalgia, reputation, and unresolved tension, all wrapped in sarcasm and dropped without warning. Because when Curtis Jackson goes quiet for a while and then suddenly presses post, history doesn't just resurface, it re-enters the chat with attitude. The spark was familiar, a reference to an old controversy, a number that's been whispered about for years. That $8 million figure dragged back into the spotlight like it still had something to say. No court filings attached, no official statements, just a resurfacing of claims that never fully disappeared, only aged in the background while hip-hop crowned its kings and moved on. And the timing? That's what made people uncomfortable, because this didn't feel random. 50 Cent doesn't throw darts in the dark. He throws them when the room is full and the cameras are rolling. His commentary landed with that trademark mix of humor and menace, the kind that lets him say "I'm joking" while everyone else scrambles to check the receipts. And once Jay-Z's name was attached, the temperature jumped instantly. Not because something new was proven, but because something old was remembered. That's the danger zone. Old claims don't need confirmation to go viral, they need context and a loud enough megaphone. And 50 Cent is a megaphone with a sense of timing that borders on diabolical. To understand why this moment hit so hard, you have to understand the history between these two names. This isn't just beef. It's rivalry layered over decades, wrapped in respect, resentment, competition, and a long-running debate about power in hip-hop. They've traded jabs before, publicly and privately. But this time the jab came with archival energy. It came with the implication that not all chapters were closed when people thought they were. The internet reacted like someone had leaked a sequel nobody knew was in production. Timelines split instantly. One side dismissed it as classic 50 Cent trolling, the same man who treats Instagram like a stand-up stage and controversy like cardio. The other side leaned in hard, asking why these specific claims were being referenced now. Because when allegations resurface without explanation, people assume motive. Fair or not, curiosity fills the silence, and silence was everywhere. Jay-Z didn't respond immediately. No denial, no dismissal, no clarification. And as always, silence did the loudest talking online. Fans interpreted restraint as confidence. Critics framed it as avoidance. Neutral observers just watched the engagement numbers climb like a rocket. Because once a story involves legacy, money, and unresolved allegations, the internet doesn't wait for facts, it builds theories. The $8 million figure became shorthand overnight. Not because everyone understood it, but because numbers feel concrete in a sea of speculation. People don't need full context to repeat a number. They just need it to sound important. And this one did. Posts broke down imaginary timelines. Comment sections argued about what it could represent. Old blog headlines resurfaced, stripped of nuance and reposted like breaking news. Then came the more sensitive layer, the shocking claims people referenced without spelling out. Not accusations restated, not details expanded, but the implication that there were uncomfortable conversations from the past that never fully settled. This is where things get volatile, because implication invites imagination, and imagination online has no brakes. Reaction channels flooded the feed. Thumbnails screamed, "This again? And why now?" Shocked faces, red arrows, question marks doing Olympic-level gymnastics. Nobody claimed proof. Nobody needed to. They were reacting to a reaction, which is the safest way to pour gasoline on a fire without lighting the match yourself. 50 Cent's tone didn't help calm anything down. If anything, it sharpened the blade. His sarcasm cut through like a grin you don't trust. He didn't look angry. He looked entertained. And when someone looks entertained while reopening old wounds, the internet assumes strategy, not emotion. Strategy. People started asking whether this was about accountability or attention, whether it was a warning shot or just another chapter in 50's long-running performance art of provocation. And that question mattered, because intent changes how people process information. A joke feels different than a warning. A troll feels different than a reminder. Memes arrived on schedule. Some compared the moment to a reboot nobody asked for but everyone watched anyway. Others joked that hip-hop was having its previously on episode. Humor softened the edges while keeping the story alive, exactly how viral cycles work. Laugh first, question later, share always. What made this resurface louder than previous moments was the era. Audiences are less forgiving now, more skeptical, more interested in re-examining the past with modern eyes. So when old controversies get mentioned, people don't treat them like dusty history. They treat them like unresolved cases. And unresolved cases attract crowds. Bloggers had to walk a tightrope. Headlines used words like resurface, reignite, and spark debate. Careful language, loud implications. Comment sections, however, showed no such restraint. People argued about responsibility, legacy, and whether revisiting old claims helps or harms culture. Nobody agreed. Everyone participated. Jay-Z's legacy loomed large over the conversation, not because it was collapsing, but because it was being questioned. And questioning a legacy feels radical in a culture that often treats success as immunity. That's why this moment felt bigger than beef. It felt like a stress test. Meanwhile, 50 Cent's supporters praised him for keeping the same energy. Critics accused him of stirring chaos for engagement. Both sides were probably right. And that duality is exactly why his posts land the way they do. He doesn't need consensus. He needs attention. By the end of the day, this wasn't about confirming anything. It was about reopening conversations people thought were done. It was about reminding everyone that history doesn't disappear just because it stops trending. And it was about proving, once again, that when 50 Cent decides to poke the archive, the internet will do the rest of the work for him. Once 50 Cent's post finished its first lap around the internet, the story stopped being about what was said and started being about why now. That's always the turning point. Because when timing becomes the headline, people stop laughing and start digging. And digging is the internet's favorite hobby. Twitter lit up like a power grid in a storm. Half the platform treated it as classic 50 behavior, trolling with a grin, stirring the pot for sport, and watching the algorithm do jumping jacks. The other half treated it like a reopened case file. Threads popped up with timelines, screenshots, and context pulled from so many different years it felt like someone shook a filing cabinet and hit post. Same material, different conclusions. That's how you know a moment has legs. TikTok did what TikTok always does, it dramatized everything. Creators stitched 50's post with ominous music, zoom-ins, and captions screaming this is not a coincidence. Others went the opposite route, clowning the entire situation like it was hip-hop's version of a soap opera rerun. One viral clip compared the whole thing to a reboot nobody asked for but couldn't stop watching. Another joke that 50 Cent treats the past like a playlist he can shuffle whenever he's bored. Memes multiplied faster than explanations. Jay-Z's calm public image got contrasted with 50's chaos like it was a Marvel crossover nobody greenlit. Some posts framed it as legacy vs. trolling, others framed it as history catching up. None of them claimed proof. All of them spread like wildfire. Celebrity reactions came in the way they always do now, indirectly. No press conferences, no direct statements, just likes, reposts, and carefully vague captions that sent fans into detective mode. Someone posted a quote about accountability. Another shared a message about how time doesn't erase questions. The internet treated every interaction like it was Morse code. Silence was decoded. Neutrality was questioned. Even indifference was interpreted as strategy. Reaction channels stacked thumbnails like poker chips. Shocked faces, bold text, question marks so large they deserved their own merch line. Nobody promised answers. Nobody needed to. They were reacting to the reaction, which is the safest lane when a story is hot but facts are cold. Views climbed. Comment sections turned into ideological battlegrounds. What really pushed this moment over the edge was how the conversation split generationally. Older fans rolled their eyes, calling it recycled beef and performance trolling. Younger audiences, less attached to legacy narratives, asked harder questions. Why do old claims keep resurfacing? Why do certain stories never fully go away? Why does success feel like immunity until it doesn't? That generational divide gave the story extra oxygen. The $8 million figure became symbolic. People debated it endlessly without fully agreeing on its context. Some treated it like a smoking gun. Others treated it like bait. But numbers feel authoritative, even when details are murky. Once a number sticks, it becomes shorthand. And shorthand travels far. Then came the uncomfortable layer, the way shocking claims were referenced without being detailed. Not restated, not expanded, just alluded to. That vagueness did more damage than specifics ever could. Because vagueness invites imagination, and imagination online has zero restraint. People projected, assumed, connected dots that were never meant to touch. This is where things got tense. Some users tried to slow the narrative down, reminding others that resurfaced claims are not confirmations. Those posts got buried almost instantly. Because caution doesn't trend. Nuance doesn't get shared. Outrage does. Suspicion does. And the internet was in full suspicion mode. Jay-Z's continued silence became its own storyline. Supporters framed it as confidence, no need to dignify noise. Critics framed it as avoidance. Neutral observers noted that any response would only pour fuel on the fire. In moments like this, there's no winning move. Speak and amplify. Stay quiet and invite speculation. 50 Cent, meanwhile, appeared completely unbothered by the chaos he triggered. If anything, the reaction validated the move. His brand thrives on disruption. He doesn't need the internet to agree with him, he needs it to engage. And engage it did. Every think piece, every reaction video, every meme extended the lifespan of the moment. Pop culture comparisons went wild. Some joked this was hip-hop's version of a previously on episode. Others said it felt like the trailer for a documentary that would never officially drop, but somehow still haunt the culture. The jokes kept it light while the implications stayed heavy, a perfect recipe for viral as days passed. The tone shifted slightly. The laughter faded. The questions stayed. People started asking what this does to legacies when old controversies refused to stay buried. Not because anything new was proven, but because the conversation itself reopens wounds. Legacy isn't just built on achievements, it's built on what survives scrutiny. Blogs adjusted their language. Headlines softened while comment sections hardened. Resurfaces replaced exposes. Sparks debate replaced reveals. That's always the signal that a story crossed from entertaining into uncomfortable. Nobody wanted to push harder, but nobody wanted to let it go either. The most revealing part of this phase wasn't what people said about Jay-Z or 50 Cent. It was what they said about the culture, about how quickly we recycle controversies, about how little proof is required to reignite suspicion, about how the internet treats history like an open tab it never closes. By the end of the week, the moment had fully detached from its origin. It wasn't about one post anymore. It was about trust, power, and the uneasy feeling that some conversations never really end, they just wait for the right trigger to resurface. And while the internet debated, laughed, and argued itself into exhaustion, the real consequences were lining up quietly. Not cancellations, not lawsuits. Something subtler. Reputations don't crack loudly. They creak. And once people hear that creak, they listen closer. Because when resurface claims ignite this much noise without new evidence, it raises a dangerous question not just about the people involved, but about the system that keeps these moments alive. When the volume finally dipped, it didn't sound like closure. It sounded like the room going quiet after someone drops a sentence nobody knows how to respond to. The internet may have moved on to the next headline, but the tension 50 Cent reawakened didn't disappear, it settled. And settling tension is far more dangerous than loud outrage. Jay-Z's camp didn't rush to clean anything up. No aggressive denials, no counterposts, no visible scramble. That restraint alone spoke volumes. Supporters framed it as confidence, the posture of someone who doesn't need to chase every online flare-up. Critics, however, read it as strategic distance, the kind that lets a moment burn out without feeding it oxygen. Either way, silence became part of the narrative whether anyone wanted it or not. What changed wasn't Jay-Z's achievements or status. It was how people talked about them. Conversations became more careful. Praise came with qualifiers. Legacy discussions suddenly included footnotes. Not because anything new had been proven, but because resurface claims remind people that success doesn't erase history, it just buries it deeper until someone decides to dig. That's the part that lingered for 50 Cent. The aftermath looked familiar. No backlash that stuck. No real penalty. If anything, the moment reinforced his reputation as hip-hop's most unpredictable instigator, the man who knows exactly how to press cultural pressure points without ever standing still long enough to get pinned down. Supporters praised his fearlessness. Critics accused him of reckless attention-seeking. Neither interpretation slowed him down. And that's the uncomfortable truth. 50 doesn't operate on approval. He operates on reaction. The chaos isn't collateral damage, it's the point. By reopening old conversations, he didn't claim authority over truth. He claimed control over timing. And timing in the internet era is power. What happened next was quieter but more revealing. Industry conversations shifted. Not publicly, privately. People spoke in hypotheticals, asked questions they hadn't asked in years, revisited old assumptions. That doesn't show up in trending tabs, but it reshapes perception all the same. Once doubt enters a conversation, it doesn't need proof to stay alive. It just needs repetition. The culture responded with fatigue. Some fans called for accountability. Others called for perspective. A growing group asked why resurfacing unproven claims keeps working so well online. Because this moment exposed something bigger than two rappers. It exposed how easily history can be weaponized when algorithms reward suspicion more than certainty. Blogs and commentators began reframing the story as a lesson rather than a scandal. Not about guilt or innocence, but about narrative control. About how quickly an allegation can re-enter public consciousness without context. About how resurface doesn't mean resolved. That distinction matters. But it rarely survives virality. Jay-Z's legacy didn't collapse, but it didn't remain untouched either. The conversation around it grew more layered, more conditional. And in an era obsessed with re-evaluation, that's enough to feel seismic. Not because the foundation cracked, but because people started tapping on it again, listening for echoes. Meanwhile, fans noticed something else. The lack of an ending. No apology. No final statement. No moment where someone says, "That's it. We're done." The story didn't conclude, it paused. And paused stories have a habit of returning when the conditions are right. That's what made this moment unsettling. It didn't burn bright and fade. It smoldered. It reminded everyone that some narratives never really go away, they just wait for someone bold enough, bored enough, or strategic enough to bring them back. The internet eventually shrugged and scrolled on. But the residue remained. In how people reacted to future posts. In how jokes landed differently. In how legacy conversations carried more caution than before. These are the invisible consequences of viral resurfacing. They don't scream. They whisper. And whispers last longer. This wasn't a reckoning. It wasn't an exposure. It was a reminder. A reminder that history is not static. That reputations are not sealed. And that in a culture driven by engagement, the past is always one post away from becoming the present again. For 50 Cent, it was another successful detonation. For Jay-Z, it was a moment that tested the armor of legacy. For the audience, It was proof that controversy doesn't need new evidence to feel fresh, it just needs timing, tone, and a willing crowd. And that's the real aftermath, not who was right, not who was wrong, but how easily the conversation shifted. Because once resurface claims regain momentum, they don't ask permission to exist. They don't wait for closure. They simply re-enter the bloodstream of culture and see how far they can travel. Now don't just sit there pretending this didn't stir something up. Get in the comments. Was 50 Cent just doing what 50 does best, trolling with surgical precision, or did he reopen conversations hip-hop would rather keep buried? Is resurfacing old claims fair game in an era obsessed with accountability? Or is this just chaos disguised as commentary? Say it out loud. Debate it. Argue it. This comment section is the real roundtable.